All right. We're going to kick off the workforce development and training session, panel discussion. I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'll have the panelists introduce themselves. My name is James Hughes. I'm the Executive Director for Career Team. We operate a workforce development contract here in Pierce County. We serve transitioning soldiers from the military, spouses, low-income adults, individuals who have been laid off, individuals suffering from mass layoffs or substantial layoffs. So we get a chance to work a lot with job seekers in Pierce County and transition them back to different career fields that are in demand. We also work with a lot of our training providers here in Pierce County when it comes to credentialing and just training to get into another career field, or boosting up their skill sets or whatnot. I'm really excited to sit and moderate with this panel of individuals here today. Looking at workforce development, we're always looking at what the next 5 to 10 years looks like. A lot of the discussion I've been hearing about today, it really does show a lot of opportunity. So I'm really excited to kind of get into some of the questions and then hear from the panelists. So I'm going to pass it down the line and let you guys introduce your name, where you guys come from, and a little bit about your interest in being here today.
Thank you. Russ Vaughan with Vaughan Timbers, based in Colville, Washington. We're about hour and a half north of Spokane. We've got a CLT and glulam facility. So we'll be talking about the nuts and bolts of training folks for the real jobs that are out there today.
Thank you. My name is Robin T. Lewis. I'm the Vice President of Finance at Bates Technical College. And I'm here primarily to listen to what is going on in the industry, take it back to our campus, hopefully inspire faculty and administrators to develop new programs, the ones that are needed to actually address where the workforce is going regarding alternative materials. So thank you very much for having me here today.
Good afternoon. I'm Burke Gregory, a partner at Methune, a design firm in Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, and working on a variety of timber projects. We have 7 active CLT mass timber projects in the practice right now. And, the demand side is quite high. So I'll talk a little bit about that too.
Hi, I'm Steve Anderson. I'm an instructor and I write specialized curriculum for Northwest Carpenters Institute. It's jointly managed training trust with jointly managed by industry and labor. Pacific Northwest Regional Council Carpenters, it'd be the union carpenters, and signatory contractors.
Awesome. So this first question, we're going to start out with Russ and Bert, and we want to ask the question, what type of skill sets do people need to work in the CLT industry? And then what type of training have you guys seen in your own industry that people have received, and how has that gone so far? And I'll let Russ or Bert start off.
Yeah, I'll answer that. I think a lot of the skills are borrowed from other efforts that we've had in other manufacturing fields prior to there being CLT. There's some unique applications of those skills as we move forward, and there's skills that might have been in aerospace before or other advanced manufacturing with regards to CNC manufacturing that are now coming into the practice of making CLT and mass timber. So I think that the most important thing for us as a manufacturer is to work with the suppliers of the equipment. They're the ones that are the experts on the softwares that operate it, the actual mechanical use of their equipment. And I think if you're in the space of trying to train a workforce, that's first and foremost. Lean on the suppliers. And then from there, there's no replacement for working on the job and getting the practice. And so the longer we practice and do things, the better the folks get. And sometimes attitude's more important than aptitude, but you have to have a basic aptitude to get started.
I think the skills, I'll represent really the design industry, which is architects, engineers, all of us. It's a process of integration that is advancing continually. And so what we look for in team members is someone who understands how to be a really good team member, and not individual, but understanding how to collaborate, how to work up and down the industry stream to understand where the best answers are going to come from, and then be able to deliver a project that takes the best of those answers and integrate it into a holistic solution. Being a team ball player is really important for us because that's where the industry is, and as evidenced by the Forterra project, really the really sophisticated solutions are done in a fully collaborative, integrated process. I think that as we try to seek knowledge about this new stuff, we can take lessons from other industries. When we think of a building, we're thinking of all the parts and the components. So steel to wood, concrete's a little bit different, but we're thinking of how do we assemble the tectonics of the building together to create a beautiful and a cost-effective building. So as we move to wood, and especially with CLT and mass timber, we're looking to Europe a lot to gain lessons from the European solutions. We're looking here kind of regionally from all our partners and friends that are developing these early mass timber buildings and have learned from the school of hard knocks on what to do and what not to do. There's a lot of great programs. Obviously, Woodworks has been instrumental in educating the industry. AIA, events like this. Learning by doing, we have a lot of R&D projects, so we have clients engaging us to try to solve particular typology issues for be it student housing or affordable housing or other things, and so we learn through that. And then certainly mentoring up and down, there's a lot of incredibly talented people, a lot less experienced than I have, who are much more experienced in CLT than I personally have.
Awesome, thank you. Steve, this question is going to be for you. Coming from NWCI, you are actually one of the only mass timber specific training programs in the region.
Right.
If you would, could you talk a little bit about what made you guys decide to devote resources into mass timbering, and then also what does demand look like?
Sure. So NWCI, one of our primary things that we do is train apprentice carpenters. So we have about 3,000 apprentice carpenters, and that's something that we do on a daily basis. Obviously, that takes a lot of our time, but we also watch industry and try to keep training available to journeymen and upgrade training. So we've always kind of got our finger on the pulse of what's going on. And a couple of years ago, I went down here to Portland, the conference, and I came back to our headquarters in Kent, and I said, guys, we're a little bit behind the curve here, I think. So we started developing this CLT, mass timber program, 8-hour curriculum, just to get something started. So we have a one-day, 8-hour program specifically designed to introduce people that have been in the industry for years. This might be something new to them, specifically designed to introduce them to mass timber, working with solid wood, and it focuses primarily on CLT. We get some training in, we get some hands-on, we have some mock-ups that we use, and so it was just really important that we're looking to industry and we're following what industry is doing. That's where we get our content for our courses, because quite frankly, that's what we rely on. We have to be able to supply a skilled workforce that's available and current. So we look at half a dozen things when we're developing this curriculum. Adult learners, obviously they never open the instruction manual, right? So where do people make mistakes, right? Those are what cost the most. What's the need of the industry? We talk to, we come to these conferences, we talk to consultants, and we say, would it help to be able to put a certification, in your specifications, right? Well, that comes up, says sure. So that's another thing that we're working on. But in order to keep pace with industry and be able to serve the industry, you have to be able to, because industry knows what alternatives are available, and they know the alternatives for workforce development and maintenance. And so that's really where we get our, our content and what it is that we use to develop the programs. The terminology's in context. What are the critical attributes? We talked about that a little bit. What are the critical attributes? Well, what's a building inspector going to look for? Well, that's a good question, right? Because codes are still kind of floating out there, right? So we look at, critical attributes. And of course, in our 8-hour training, we cut the information and we get to the doing, right? We get out there, we have mock-ups pre-made that are accurate. And we try to simulate, exactly what it takes. We go over all the new screw fasteners, all the new technology involved, the adhesives that are used, right? We touch on that when we first start. This is the concept of building with mass timber and solid wood is just as important as actually the process, right? So we're process people, like, okay, I need part A to go with part B, and this assembly process, projects are short. But what is it that makes this work, and why can I use this fastener here and not over here? That's just as important. We all do concrete and steel. We all do precast concrete. I worked on precast concrete crews for 3 or 4 years, okay? And every time it was a 6 to 8 week job. That's it. You're going to do a parking garage? Fine. You do a parking garage, you're in 6 weeks, you're out, right? Where's the next one? Well, we ended up doing fire station for Grant County. We did potato seed storage sheds. We did, so in terms of the length and the duration of the projects, it might be shortening up a little bit, but the anticipation is you have higher volume, right? And that's the expectation with this. And so, and I was asked a question about, well, what about down the road, when maybe the market gets saturated? Maybe you have CLT buildings everywhere, which will be great. 20 years from now or whatever, what do? Well, if you have a professional who's skilled in being able to take these buildings apart, assemble them in the first place, right? Who are you going to call when maybe you need to make an adjustment to that building, right? You have that market too. So in terms of market share and, where's the work going to be and how are we going to get it? We're going to get it by keeping our finger on the pulse of industry and what it's doing and being able to serve those contractors that need that assistance.
Thank you. Robin, yes, you have been trying to create a CLT curriculum at Bates College for a while. Could you talk a little bit about some of the barriers, in creating a curriculum like that, and then what needs to be in place for an institution like Bates College to kind of create a program like that?
That's good. Thank you. For Bates Tech, we've been in the Tacoma area for 80 years. It's a nice time this year, our 80th anniversary. But as the years have gone along, our programs haven't quite responded to what industry is doing or demanding or wanting. You get a lot of academics in the room, and they all know the best thing for the institution, and sometimes they don't move at all. And it's frustrating for those of us, especially the newer staff, faculty, advisors, who are trying to move forward and be competitive with everyone that's out there, be it another technical college or be it a private company that will offer the same type of training that we have. So it's a commitment, I believe, with our new administration at Bates Technical to truly listen to what the industry is asking for, to look at and take a really careful look at where it's going, to think about, the green initiatives and renewable products and recyclables and things like that, because we can't keep doing the same things the same way, because our resources are that much more precious. So with that in mind, it's been a charge of the newer administration and faculty to truly pay attention to what the industry is wanting and to adapt and develop those programs. Whereas previously, in prior years, as I said, the academics really didn't want to change up. They didn't want to respond because they've been doing it this way for 40 years, and what's wrong with that? Well, we know what's wrong with that. We get left behind. So we're trying to listen and be very responsive so that industry can turn to us when they need those specialists, when they need those apprentices, when they need those trained, skilled laborers to actually do some of the work. And that's why I truly believe now is the time where we're paying attention, and there's a lot of good energy taking place at Bates Technical. So I'm hopeful that with all of the information that we're getting, we're able to move that much more faster to kind of stay ahead of where other competition would be. Being in the Tacoma area, and for those of you that have seen Tacoma truly rise kind of like a phoenix, it's really heartening to see what we've done in the amount of time that we have. We have built up such niceties. It's like this little metro hipster place, but that's a good thing, where people actually want to be and want to stay. And it's a charge for Bates Technical to look around at the community and watch it develop, but not just from the outside, but helping it to develop with the skilled employees that we're able to train up and go out and get meaningful employment so they can have a much better life. I'm very proud to be here in Tacoma and working for Bates Technical, because I see how we do care for the community here, and we want to help it flourish and grow and be, that bright spot, so people will actually come back and not just come to Washington for Seattle, but hey, let's go to Tacoma. It's a pretty nice place to be. And also, with the faculty that we have on board, with our carpentry, with architecture, even some of our woodworking, they are very, very forward-thinking. And in the past, they have run into some obstacles just trying to bring up the idea of alternative materials. We're listening now, and it's to our advantage to truly pay attention, because we don't want to be left behind. We want to be right here with you guys doing the great work that you're doing, and also giving back and lifting up the community here in Tacoma.
That's awesome. Thank you. So this question is going to be for everyone on the panel. I often joke about workforce development. I don't know if it's the same in every industry, but we have meetings about meetings, and then we schedule another meeting. Can I get a show of hands if that's similar? So it's a couple of you guys. All right, just making sure it's not just workforce. So we're having a great discussion about CLT, and everyone's giving great feedback. The question I have for you guys, and I'll let each person take a shot at this, is what makes now the right time to make this happen? And then how do we know that there'll be job opportunities for individuals on the other side of investing time into training and resources into this information? So I'll let anyone start, but I would love to hear your feedback from each person on the panel.
I'll go ahead and start. I come from a very old and probably stodgy industry in the sawmill business, in the forest products industry. And we've had the opportunity with CLT to actually see the future, and it's been going on about 20 years ahead of us in Europe. And so we aren't just starting with a brand new product and starting from scratch with no idea, and Bert touched on that as well. We're taking a lot of lessons learned there and applying them here, but the nice thing is that barring a few countries and a few localities in Europe, they don't traditionally build with wood. In North America, we do. And so what we're going to do, I think, is take a look at mass timber and see where it fits in the building world. And I think it's going to be a really big thing, because I've already seen what's gone on in Europe. You have places like France that are mandating more use of wood because they see the benefits of it. And we've gotten away from the mass timber elements because of fire issues in the past. And a lot of our downtown structures in places like Tacoma and Seattle and Portland were constructed of heavy timbers. And now we have the ability with technology and the utilization of small diameter trees to build heavy timber again, but this time it's clean tech instead of just cutting old growth timber and making something cool. And so I see that as something that's going to grow rapidly, and it has, if you look at every trend we have out there, it's all pointing towards more use of wood in the built environment. And so that, to me, I think spells really good things for everybody, whether it's workforce training or manufacturing or building and constructing wood buildings.
You know, I would say market demand is really the driver right now, and market demand is being fueled. Craig spoke to it a little bit. I mean, you know, we have to construct billions of square feet of space to house and the people that are coming to the world, several billion people, and, you know, several 100 million here in the United States. Even in our region, millions of people will be coming in the next, 30 to 40 years. So we've got a lot of market demand that we need to satisfy. And part of that is we need to do it cost effectively. Craig and John spoke about productivity. The built environment is a very cumbersome environment to do something. And I think mass timber is a way to streamline that and simplify it and deliver projects faster at a much more cost-effective way. Another aspect of market demand is what the kind of places people want to be in. And, it has shifted radically in the last decade, 15 years. An office user would want a 9-foot ceiling with lay-in tile and a really nice cubicle. And that's not where the demand is now. The demand is in creative office space for people that, really want to work. They realize how much time they spend. They want to work in really great spaces with a lot of natural light, great materials, and something that has personality. So there's a huge demand for different kinds of living and working spaces, and I think mass timber fills that exceedingly well. And I think the third aspect is the carbon imperative. And, it's a revolution in the industry and the private sector and the academic sector and the public sector in terms of what is the responsibility of corporations, citizens, governments, the academic institutions about what are we going to do about this issue that we've got, and we know we've got to do it very, very fast. There's the 2030 commitment that our firm signed up for, which is to eliminate fossil fuels from all buildings by 2030. Our state building code is aligned with that ambition. But the next big crunch that we've got to solve is the embodied carbon in the environment and the percentage of carbon output that's just going to be released from not the correct aspects of building materials is huge in the next decade. So if we're going to try to tackle the issues about climate change, we need to focus heavily on the embodied carbon in our buildings. And that means eliminating concrete, steel, and aluminum unless it's been manufactured in a process that reduces the effective utilization of fossil fuels. So you look at corporations who are committed to this. You have Microsoft, you have Google, you have Walmart. It's going to build a completely new mass timber campus in Arkansas. The academic institutions, they're all extremely interested in, they've signed president climate commitments about 7 or 8 years ago, said that they would be carbon neutral by 2030. We've done master plans. Seattle University wants to do it by 2029. They're going to beat those other guys. So I think there's a really big change. And then the regulatory environment is going to evolve very quickly. There's the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, which is a collection of 10 municipal governments in the United States that have been organizing to understand how to regulate embodied carbon in buildings. And so you'll see that coming forward fairly soon, I think. Seattle is one of those 10 cities. European cities are already regulating the embodied carbon. So mass timber's time, I think, has come for a variety of reasons. So I think the demand's going to be there.
And to pick up where Bert was, it's especially true on the college campuses, college and university campuses. You see the students, you hear their voices. They're very concerned about the future and where they're going to be tomorrow. So we are listening to that, and we want to effectively create a space for learning, for training, for the education, so that they can learn the skills working with all the products that are out there, so that they can be ready for the next demand, for the next big thing that comes their way. It's giving the people what they want, so to speak, but I think it's very smart, again, because we're looking at industry, we're turning to industry and asking the questions: where do you think we're going to be? What do you think is going to be desired? And adapting, because if you don't adapt, you die. So we're trying to infuse at least Bates Technical Institution with the energy, with the drive, with the desire to maybe we're a little late to the party, but to still be on the forefront of the change that's coming, that's developing, that's growing throughout not just the community, but the nation. So it's timely. It really is, because especially with the concern that the youth has, be it high school students, traditional college-age students, or older adult college students, they're still concerned about what kind of environment we're leaving to our children, to our grandchildren. So to me, it's very exciting to learn of the possibilities, and especially with partnering with some of the other organizations and companies so that we can collectively work together and provide what's needed.
Yeah, so from a training standpoint, contractors, the industry definitely controls the workflow. Okay, our apprentices, 90% of their time is in the field. That's right, that's on the job training. We get them for 10% of the time. So yeah, they're very interested in not old and stuffy, new and cool. Okay, that's what they're interested in. And they're very interested in what's gonna work for the future and where they're gonna be. Our sweet spot's probably 25-year-old, somewhere in there. And when I mean my sweet spot is, that's the one who's going to finish the program in 4 years. Stay with, get in, we're going to commit the resources to this person, and they're going to go through the whole program in 4 years. So that individual who's been out there had a taste for what the current job market is out there right now. Maybe into school, a little bit of college, maybe not. Life happens, and we get them, and they're ready to go. And so that group, I'd say 18 to 34-year-olds, right? Very interested in, how things are going to pan out for them in the future. I have 2 30-year-olds and one that's 33. The oldest, she's clinical psychologist. She's done. She's got a handle. She knew exactly from 8th grade. But the other two, one is now an apprentice carpenter, about a year and a half in, and the other got her teaching credentials to be a teacher like her mother. But, really tough, right? Cost of college was way out there. So, in terms of developing a workforce, they're very interested and very ready. As a matter of fact, we have people that come through our program. One in particular I know of, a female that Microsoft, she wrote contracts for Nokia and Microsoft because there's a little section of code that holds your video, so when you come back 3 days later after you turn it and pause it on Netflix and it's still there, that code belongs to Microsoft, just so you know. Anyway, but Karen she had no furniture in her office. She said, don't come into my office if you want to sit down because I've got no furniture. She just had to be moving all the time and wanted to be outside. They were throwing money at her and she's like, it doesn't matter. I want to be outside. This is what I want to do. So she got in the apprenticeship and went through the 4 years and now is running work for PCL, I think, or selling. Anyway, but point being is as far as workforce development goes, the human resources out there, they're there, and they just need to know what's going to happen? Well, CLT, mass timber, solid wood construction, this type of thing is extremely positive for them. Very positive on a social level, on an environmental level, on an economic level, on all these. You're hitting 90% of the criteria for these folks. So they're going to be there and they're going to be ready to be able to work with mass timber, particularly CLT. So it's a very positive thing for us. We're enthusiastic about it, and because we can see the potential. Yeah. There's just a huge potential. Like Burke was saying, there's a lot of projects in the pipeline right now. A lot in the planning stages, and we're going to make sure we got the workforce ready for those projects.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. You touched on something. I just want to ask you guys just a quick off-ball question. You were talking about the age range of like 18 to 34, and depending on which study on Google you look, that's pretty much still millennial, right? We've been having a lot of conversations in our space about how do we transition different age groups into different positions and different roles. So if the 18 to 34 or 25, 26-year-old is kind of like that sweet spot, and this is kind of an open discussion for everyone too, with learning how we can use CLT to improve what we're doing and create opportunities, is it going to be an opportunity for all age range? Like, so say if you got a guy who's been in carpentry for like 25 years, maybe he's 50 years old. Is it easy for him to learn a new way of doing this? And can he be successful in this? Can he change the way he's doing the field, just like we are doing like with that sweet spot generation? Like, have you guys had any experience with that? Has there been any conversations around that? Just like around like how different generations will approach CLT.
Yeah, I can speak to that just real quick. We had one training a few weeks back. It was contractor requested training. I think that speaks to that. They were in their 40s, and they had the training, and in a month they're going to send their entire company over, and everybody's going to get trained in it. They went through the course no problem, and they were excited to talk about it, and very, very ready to take on that next step. So yeah, I don't think there's any issue as far as being able to transition into a new type of construction. The productivity, that's it's kind of it's just a common thread. It's like, okay, well, we're doing this new thing now, so our productivity is supposed to change or something. No, it's just where do people get it wrong? Where do they make the mistakes? I want to know that so that I don't do that, right? So I know I need to keep my productivity up, right? So what is it? So that's what we focus on. What are the critical attributes? Where do people get it wrong, right? Because they cost the most, right? So that's what we focus on. And then, yeah, so they're very in tune to that. They're very in tune to that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I think that's where Bates Tech comes in, because our student age group will go from 18 to 70. And because people want to earn that living and stay effective members of their community, they're going to want to learn the skill. So, they can send them over to Bates to get trained up in something new so that they can go and get the next job or the promotion on their job. And yeah, we would like to be partners with that. We would like to provide all of that training and service.
That's awesome. Thank you. So now we're going to take an opportunity to open up to the floor and see if there's any questions we can answer from you guys from the panel.
Thank you. It's been super informative. This is probably more towards Russ than anything. Thanks for coming and visiting us here, the home to Weyerhaeuser, in the beginnings there. What are some of the skill sets that you look for in a workforce? Do you look at that first before citing, or do you look at market need for the product? Because we're talking here in Tacoma easily 40 to 80 mid-rise buildings just to maybe touch our housing crisis here. What are some of the criteria you look for that?
That's a good question. We're trying to deliver products to those. And by the way, Nate's the only other person in this room that went to the same high school I did, so thanks for the question. We look to deliver products to our customers or clients. So how can we best do that? And I was just thinking about when we were talking about the age groups, I think we've got one baby boomer that's a former retired from Boeing that lives in Colville and wasn't ready to really retire, and he's doing our quality control and breaks all the finger joint tests and does all that stuff, and he just loves it. He emails me all the time with cool ideas, and he's probably 72 or 73 years old, and he's just like he's probably top 5 in energy at our place. And then I'd say there's probably about 10 of us that fit the Gen X crowd, and the rest are millennials, and there's a few Generation Z folks in there. And everybody's a little bit different in how they're motivated. So I think the trick is like, how do you figure out how to put all those different skills and those strengths and double up on those and the weaknesses, and don't allow those to be exposed for folks in order for us to deliver what the clients want. And what we try to also do is empower the folks with the information to do things, whether it's testing or designing layups or materials of different species that are going to help our clients go from needing a 5-ply floor plate to go to a 3-ply floor plate, which we had a specific project, for instance, that was the case. And by going to a stronger 3-ply panel, we were able to cut $250,000 cost off a bid that was under $1 million. So it went from about $800,000 down to about $500,000, which made the project go. And just having our employee base knowing to look for things like that are going to tip things over in the favor of both our client and ultimately us. That's how we try to do that. And as a leader, it's my job to decipher that stuff, translate it into bite-sized pieces that make sense to somebody that's running a finger joiner, that makes sense to somebody that's taking a Revit model and converting it to CAD work so the DDX on our CNC can cut the pieces to make the material work. Because I can't, the thing that we can't do is try to give them all the information that's out there, because they'll be overloaded. So that's why we create things like key performance indicators at each level, and we try to decipher that so the information that's important to them is flowing in the same direction of the product that we're trying to get to our clients. So that's the best way I have to answer that and going forward. And I think just being at functions like this and interacting and then taking that information back and creating, whether it's curriculum from outside or internal curriculum to try to educate and build the skills to meet the demand is what we're trying to do.
All right, we'll get some mics over here.
Good afternoon. What are the wage ranges in this new field? If you talk about being a slightly less expensive process, does it depress wages at all for people who are entering the industry or thinking about getting trained up in the industry?
I could tell you that we're approaching it just as you would look at it like it was precast concrete, meaning the wage probably won't be affected, only in a sense, in a compounded sense, maybe a yearly, if you were to take an hourly wage and calculate it out over the year, if the projects weren't lined up, because they will be faster. There's no doubt about that. So that may impact a yearly total, but we anticipate that the skills would transfer. So it would make sense that the wage and the resource available to do the work would still be there as well to support that.
If I could, I do sense there's this kind of balance between wages and speed of construction and putting people out of work. It just doesn't work that way. We are so far behind on our ability to deliver housing, to deliver workforce. I can attest to that as somebody who's an employer. I benefit more from having a climate-controlled workplace than I do from paying people more money. I can tell you that because people care about where they work and how they work. I get guys leaving, for instance, Boise Cascade, 8 miles down the road that have been there for 25 years, said, hey, I took $4 an hour less to come here because I like knowing that my workstation's going to be the same temperature every time I come to work. And then I hope this really takes off because I'd like to get more money someday. But I mean, so there's this balance, and I think that I think it's actually going to create better skills to pay people more. I mean, in the sawmill industry, we've seen technology improve drastically, and it came in just the nick of time because we were having trouble with staffing, so we put in auto grading in the sawmill so we could grade lumber faster. Everybody was concerned that the graders' jobs are all going away. Those graders are now information workers. They're taking all that grader knowledge and they're applying it to the systems to make the systems work better. Those guys are so happy we don't have grader stations anymore. I mean, they make more money. So it just shifts, right? The jobs will shift. And so the skills that somebody has to erect a timber structure, they're going to be in demand. And depending on how many people can go do that, those wages are going to rise. So
Right.
I think it's an opportunity. We're not at the point yet where robots are going to control everything. Right. I think that we're still at a spot where people are going to increase their impact in the built environment, and by that they'll increase the amount of money they make.
Yeah, agreed. And I'll just just add to that. Historically, technology has always been in that spot where it's displaced people. I have an article sometimes that I show a class or two. Back, I think, the turn of the century, the previous century, around 1900, when concrete first came out, and the stonemasons. I have a little article from a Boston newspaper of a stonemason who had 11 employees, and it would take him a week to do a house foundation. And now all of a sudden he says, I don't know what I'm going to do. Is this concrete thing, 3 guys in about 4 days, and they can have a foundation done. We're done. We're wrapped up, and everybody's going to fall off, but what happens? You get trained in how to manage and use and manipulate concrete, and you run with it, and that's what you do. So sometimes I use that as an example historically, but I think technology through the ages has done that, and you make those adjustments.
So this question is probably for James. Can you talk a little bit more about what mentoring looks like for CLT, kind of beyond, obviously, training workforce, but then also training other skills? Yeah,
absolutely. I'll talk a little bit about mentoring in different workforce areas, and then I'll kind of let you guys talk about it from a CLT standpoint, being that you guys would be the subject matter experts on that. But right now, as you were just touching about how technology automation is kind of changing things. And we recognize that it's causing a uncomfortable shift with people. It's not that opportunities are going to be worse. They should be better. But people don't like change, right? You guys have all done the exercise where you switch your arms and it just feels uncomfortable. So we've worked a lot in the workforce industry now about teaching individuals how to find mentors without going through a certain program. And that's been pretty impactful. Especially for those individuals who have transitioned from a different career field. A great example of that is there was a distribution company here in Tacoma that recently laid off over 200 individuals. And some of these individuals were making $30 plus as a forklift driver, which is not a common entry-level wage you'll see here in Pierce County. So they knew they had to change, their career field, or they might have to change what they're doing for work. So we encourage them to actually find mentors in different fields so that they can learn a little bit more about that field, how to navigate that field, how to navigate change in that field. And it's been pretty impactful. So the impact we're seeing on mentors in the workforce development world is increasing. It's still a uncomfortable term, because as people It's different if we have a program that sets up mentors. It's another thing if we teach individuals how to find a mentor. And that latter one is still a little bit uncomfortable for individuals to kind of go and set that up. But we've seen really, really good positive results from that. Obviously, it expands your network as well. So it just creates a lot of opportunity. So I'll let you guys kind of talk about what you've seen from the CLT world, but that's just a quick briefing on like the workforce development world.
I think architecturally, at least in terms of mentorship, I think it's a two-way street when it comes to CLT. One of my colleagues is right here, Emily Hagan. Emily is an expert in CLT design and technology, and so she's mentoring me on a lot of the items as it relates to CLT. I think I can help with her just from my experience and understanding how sometimes to take that information and move it into a concise direction. But mentorship's really important in our industry. You know, we learn by doing, we learn from others, and having that connection is really critical. So I'd say mentorship, though, is a two-way street when it comes to new technology.
I'd just say you want to create a culture of mentoring even if you don't call it that. Because sometimes that's a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, and I think it's more uncomfortable for the mentor sometimes. So teamwork and collaboration, oftentimes they function as mentoring because people kind of figure out where their relationships are. Really what we've always wanted in the manufacturing field that I've been experienced in is making sure you have that communication linkage that's open. So somebody with experience, creating a situation where they're not afraid to help somebody else that's at entry level. Somebody that's new and wanting to learn something, don't be afraid to ask and work through that. And there are certain instances where those things happen organically and naturally, and then there are other times where you may want to create a mentor. Right now we've got a situation with our CNC where we hired a young mechanical engineer fresh out of college that never knew what he wanted to do except, be in engineering. And we said, well, do you want to learn how to run a CNC and then learn some of the software? And he's done an incredibly good job. He's not even a year with us, and now he's the mentor for another young engineer that wants to do the same thing. So sometimes it's a program that's specific, and other times I think just creating a culture where mentoring happens and you can have that learning environment naturally, I think is in my opinion and in my experience, is even more helpful.
Yeah, I had a question. It's kind of two parts, but with workforce development, I'm really curious about the pipeline to our training programs. So I guess one part of it is where we're looking to expand operations in rural areas. What are the things we need to do to make sure that there is a pipeline, or that people know of the jobs or know that the training programs help them get jobs in some of these areas, because we know that young folks may be leaving or moving. How do we keep them at home or get people in from places? And then with CLT particularly, are we doing anything, are there any programs that are kind of targeting women, communities of color, bringing new voices into the industry that maybe haven't historically been represented?
Yeah, I'll touch on the first part if you guys want to jump on that. That's a really good question. I love that question. I'd say to create a pipeline in workforce development, this is actually the foundation work of doing that, right? You bring parties to the table. You bring people that can train and create curriculum. You bring employers. You bring people that have experience. When you have all parties at the table, I call it the three-legged stool, that actually gives you a pretty strong foundation. And you just can create intentionality moments after that to create that actual flow. And again, I made a joke about meetings, but you gotta set up those intentionality moments. If not, things just kind of get pushed by the wayside of things. But to have even a room full of experts, and you have a panel here, you have employers at the table, this is amazing already. When I was asked to moderate this, I had a chance to learn about CLT for the first time. And my brain started doing the whole workforce development thing where ideas just start going like this and popping up. And I started thinking about pipeline moments of how do you align that out. So you find the need, you create the training avenue, you create the recruiting efforts. And the recruiting efforts, to your first part of that question about like the rural areas and, you know, how do you keep the talent home, that's how you kind of build that out. And you can do that with partnerships of like local partners, your workforce development agencies, your schools, your high schools, your trade schools, the whole works. I mean, you use a full I guess you could say, a full cohort model of like going out and just blitzing the market and saying like, hey, we've got something awesome here. We have a pipeline. They can see all the pieces of the pipeline, and there's a job at the end, right? A job that can actually turn into a career field. And you start throwing in things like how mentorship can even be a part of that too. Now you're really getting people jazzed up about that. So that's how you would kind of create those pipeline opportunities. But I'll let you guys kind of talk a little bit about like reaching out to populations further away from opportunities such as, you know, minorities and women as well in this field.
I could just say as looking at it from an employer, you go, okay, what are my specific needs? And then how do I hand that off and say, okay, you know, hopefully go train some people and then, you know, let me choose who might come to work here. But I think from a broader spectrum, what are those commonalities that can transcend any of the one manufacturing? And then I think, you know, talking about erection and building, that's a different set of skills. Finding that base level commonality that can be trained, and then allowing those skills to adapt to the workforce. So everybody talks about the CNC part of of cross-laminated timber, because that's what kind of makes it different than just another building material. It becomes part of the constructability. I think that the danger there is that you choose one CNC manufacturer, and you know, maybe as whether you're a labor union or whether you're industry-specific training, you buy one piece of equipment, you train everybody up on that, and then it's 1/3 of the industry, and they're running a different software program. So there's that risk. But if somebody had a base-level understanding of CAD programs and how that works and interfaces with wood, that can go a whole bunch of different directions. And so now they have this base understanding. You know, what we see a lot more of is basic and then a little bit more developed computer skills interacting with the equipment that's out there. So having those, sometimes it's the basic stuff that we take for granted that, you know, it's record keeping. I mean, we have to test a lot of this stuff. So there's still a lot of things, whether it's in a digital format or we still have to use handwritten books and logs sometimes for our testings. Making sure people understand that processes that have to go in order and just things like that can transcend any role in the manufacturing field. And I think that is, it's more simple than we think it is, and then it becomes more complex as we dig into the weeds. But I think that the complexity comes from the employer-specific work, because each one's different. Like Katerra's plant is different than our plant, which is different than D.R. Johnson's plant, so on and so forth. But what we do need to do is build some commonality in the way these structures go together, so it's easier to train and it's easier for people to design and build these structures.
And I'm going to speak to something very specific, women and persons of color. So I'm looking around the room and I see a lot of women here. And to pick up on James' point, mentorship. Okay, so it's bringing all of us to the table and then us having that individual care and concern to actually pull in people who look like us, females, right? This is a fantastic industry. And working at Bates Technical, we do emphasize the STEM program, especially for the women, especially for people of color. And we are a technical high school as well. So we can pull in the students fresh out of high school, still finishing high school, to develop that interest and to have these forward-thinking programs and classes and training with the end result of being employed. I think that's awesome because then it gets industry looking towards people who they may not have considered before. And that's a huge step because there's a lot of talent right here in Tacoma. So it is. Mentorship, James, yes, it's dire. It's very important. And a special shout out to all the ladies out there. It's awesome to see you guys in the audience.
Agree. I just like to follow up real quick on what both you said. Russ, I agree. And that's why we follow industry, right? Because I'm listening to Russ up here and I'm going, oh, maybe we need some computer skills. We do Procore, right? We do Bluebeam, but we don't do maybe FastCAD or something, right? So this is who we're serving. And then, what Robin was touching on, we do have a pre-apprenticeship, and our pre-apprenticeship is funded through grants. We have a grant with Sound Transit right now. Okay, and some of the mandate on that grant for that pre-apprenticeship program is mentoring. They have their core things that they want to see. One is mentoring, inclusion, diversity, and serving underserved population, traditionally underserved populations. Okay, so reaching out to community partners, like you were saying, James, critical aspect to this whole thing. So, I just see a lot of potential in the entire industry across the board.
I'll just mention in the design industry, it's an incredible shortage of people, and it's only going to get worse over the next decade. So we need people to enter the design fields. And our firm is over 50% women. In architecture schools right now, it's an over 50% ratio of women in architecture. It is a larger challenge for us to recruit people of color. And so we have to be very deliberate throughout the United States to target the schools of architecture that have a population that represents the kind of population that we want in our firm, that represent our community. But it has to be a very proactive, very aggressive strategy. But when you talk about workforce, there aren't enough architects, and I'm tired of turning down work.
Well, I just want to first say thank you guys for coming here to speak with us. If you guys would, give them a hand. I mean, they did a great job in their areas. This is awesome. Thank you guys for listening and asking those questions. Those are great questions. Some of the biggest takeaways that I heard today was one, the first one is that this is something that people care about. And I think that was huge, and I love that. This is something that people care about. And I think whenever we as a community can come together about something that people care about, we can do amazing things. I love what the gentleman said from McKinstry about being bold and taking a chance. In our industries, we're always talking about supply and demand. But when we look back in history, we usually always are behind the curve on things. And this gives us this opportunity to kind of get ahead of the curve. So I would hope that you guys continue these type of conversations, continue to move forward to actually build traction. And let's see what the next 5 years looks like in this industry and see what we can do here in Washington. We have a lot of talent, a lot of resources here in Washington State, and I think we can do some amazing stuff. So again, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.